The white bandage on her cheek should have just been another thing Moon-tae didn't notice, another insignificant detail in his meticulously controlled world. Just another hidden mark on an invisible woman who cleaned his Beverly Hills penthouse twice a week, moving through his space like a ghost he'd trained himself never to see. But when Rumi Cross jumped at the sound of his footsteps, her cornrows pulled back in those impossibly neat rows that must have taken an hour to perfect. Her white-gloved domestic's uniform pressed crisp despite the way her hands trembled like leaves in a storm. Something fierce and primal and protective roared to life inside him. A feeling he hadn't experienced in 15 years of building an empire through calculated violence. He'd killed people for less than the fear he saw flickering in her deep brown eyes. "Who did this to you?" His voice came out deadly calm, that same lethal quietness he used in the moments right before ordering someone's execution. The tone that made grown men confess their sins. Rumi's slender fingers shook as they moved near the dark bruise peeking out from under the white gauze, purple-black like crushed pansies against her warm brown skin. "Nobody, Mr. Moon. I fell." The lie tumbled from her lips, clumsy and unconvincing. Moon-tae stepped closer, and the afternoon sunlight streaming through his floor-to-ceiling windows caught his gold chain, making it gleam like a warning. She automatically stepped back, one small, reflexive movement that told him everything he needed to know. That tiny retreat, that instinctive flinch from a man's approach, ignited something in him that had absolutely nothing to do with the empire he'd built through blood and ruthlessness. After 15 years of running Beverly Hills' underworld from the Olympus, commanding respect through fear and money and power, Moon-tae felt something he'd never experienced before, completely and utterly out of control. "Don't lie to me," he whispered, and in that moment, everything between them shifted. The air itself seemed to change temperature. The world tilted on its axis. If you're already hooked on this story and need to see what happens next, hit that subscribe button now, because trust me, you don't want to miss a single moment of what Moon-tae does next. And if you're not subscribing, drop a comment and tell me why you're willing to walk away from this love story. For 6 months, Rumi had cleaned Moon-tae's penthouse without really seeing him, not the way you see a person, a human being with wants and fears and dreams. He existed in her mind as a presence, a force of nature she had to navigate around. Expensive designer shirts that probably cost more than 3 months of her rent. Quiet footsteps that somehow made no sound despite his height and commanding build. That expensive cologne, something woody and complex that lingered in rooms long after he left, mixing with an undercurrent of danger that made her skin prickle with awareness. She knew what mattered for survival. He paid 3 times the normal rate, enough to keep her and Flora fed, housed, safe. He never made messes, never left personal items scattered about. And most importantly, he expected her to remain invisible. A shadow, a non-person. Being invisible was Rumi's specialty, honed over 28 years of hard-won survival. 2 decades plus 8 years of being systematically overlooked had taught her how to move through spaces without disturbing the air, without leaving an imprint. She'd learned to fold herself smaller in elevators when important people entered, shoulders curving inward, eyes dropping to the floor. She breathed quietly around powerful men and women, making herself unobtrusive. She'd even learned to soften her Alabama accent until you could barely hear the South in her voice, smoothing out the warm drawl her grandmother had passed down to her like an heirloom. She'd perfected the impossible art of being physically present while remaining completely unseen. Back in Alabama, this skill had kept her safe from the wrong kind of attention, from men like Julian who saw women as possessions. In Beverly Hills, it kept her employed in a world where people like her were meant to serve, not to be noticed. Today, that careful invisibility shattered like glass, She'd covered the bruise as best she could that morning, standing in her cramped bathroom with its flickering light. Foundation 3 shades too light, because that's all the corner store in her neighborhood carried, their diverse shade range stopping somewhere around medium tan. A white bandage to hide the worst of the swelling where Julian's fist had connected with her cheekbone. Her supervisor at White Glove Domestics had already issued a warning last month. "We maintain certain standards, Ms. Cross. Our clients expect presentable staff." "Another incident, and we'll have to let you go." But Flora needed new school supplies. The list had come home yesterday, full of things Rumi couldn't afford. Rent was due in 6 days, and she was still $40 short. And Julian, her nightmare come to life, had taken the last of her emergency money, the bills she'd hidden in a coffee can under the sink. So Rumi went to work, bandaged face and all, hoping Moontae would be gone like always. The Olympus penthouse was silent when she arrived at 2 p.m., her usual time, scheduled with precision. Moontae was never home during her Tuesday and Thursday shifts. It was a small mercy she'd counted on today. Prayed for even. She'd planned to clean quickly, efficiently, and disappear before her hands stopped shaking, before the fear leaked through her carefully constructed mask. But when the private elevator opened with its soft chime, there he stood. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed him like he was a piece of art. Beverly Hills sprawling beneath his penthouse like a conquered kingdom, all glittering pools and palm trees and wealth beyond imagining. His ornate patterned shirt probably cost more than her monthly rent, maybe 2 months. Turquoise and gold dragons writhed across deep emerald green silk, the kind of fabric that whispered when he moved. The gold chain at his throat caught the afternoon light, thick and expensive and unmistakably real. He didn't turn when she entered, but somehow she knew, with that sixth sense prey develops around predators, that he'd heard her arrival, that he'd been waiting. "Mr. Moon?" Her voice came out steady, level. It was a small miracle, given that her heart was trying to pound its way out of her chest. "I didn't know you'd be home. I can come back another day." "Stay." He turned, and those dark, intelligent eyes swept over her face in one assessing glance, stopped, sharpened like a blade being honed. "Come here." It wasn't a request. Moontae didn't make requests. He issued commands that people obeyed because the alternative was unthinkable. Rumi's feet moved before her brain could catch up, propelled by years of survival instinct. When powerful men gave orders, you obeyed or faced consequences. She'd learned that lesson the hard way. She kept her face angled away as she approached, trying to hide the bandage. Stupid, she realized immediately. The movement itself screamed guilt, broadcasted her shame and fear. He crossed the distance between them in 3 silent strides, expensive designer loafers making no sound on the imported marble floors. Up close, he was devastating in a way that made her breath catch. Sharp jawline that could have been carved from stone. Perfectly styled black hair that probably required a stylist's touch each morning. The kind of presence that commanded rooms, that made people straighten their spines and watch their words. His hand lifted toward her cheek, and she fought every instinct to flinch. "What happened to your face?" The question came out quiet, controlled, but she heard the steel underneath. "I fell." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue, like poison. "It's nothing. I'm clumsy. Look at me." Not a request. Never a request. She raised her eyes slowly, reluctantly, and watched his expression shift from distant politeness to something cold and lethal, something that made her think of winter storms and unsheathed knives. His gaze dropped to her wrist, where her sleeve had ridden up during her nervous fidgeting, exposing the finger-shaped bruises that darkened her brown skin like accusatory shadows. "You fell," he repeated slowly, each syllable weighted with obvious disbelief. The way you'd repeat a child's obvious lie, giving them one more chance to tell the truth. Yes, I'm clumsy. I tripped over. Sit. His voice dropped to that deadly quiet that was somehow more terrifying than shouting. Now. She perched on the edge of his pristine white leather couch. Italian, probably, soft as butter and worth more than her car. She felt wrong in every dimension. Her cheap polyester uniform against his designer furniture. Her thrift store shoes on his expensive Persian rug. Her beaten, damaged face in his flawless space. Tell me his name. Moon Tae stood before her, hands sliding into his pockets, gold chain gleaming, studying her with an intensity that made her skin warm and prickle with awareness. There's no... Rumi. The way he said her name stopped her breath in her throat. Careful, deliberate, like she was something precious he was afraid of breaking. Like her name was a word in a language he was learning. He'd never used her first name before, always Miss Cross in that formal, distant way that maintained proper boundaries between employer and employee, between his world and hers. I've built my whole life on reading people, Rumi, on seeing what they try to hide. His voice softened slightly, losing some of that hard edge. You're terrified right now. That bandage is fresh. Applied this morning, I'd guess. Someone hurt you, and recently. She stood up fast, too fast, her cleaning caddy nearly tipping over. With respect, Mr. Moon, my personal life isn't your business. I'm here to clean your home, and I really should get back to... It became my business the second you walked into my home injured. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, expensive and woody, sandalwood maybe, mixed with something darker. Whiskey, perhaps? Or the smoke from his world she didn't understand. A world of power and violence and money. Is it a boyfriend? No. Husband? No. Then who? He paused, and something flickered across his face. Why do you care? The question burst from her lips before she could stop it. I just clean your house. I'm nobody. Something flashed across his perfectly controlled features. Surprise, maybe. Hurt, possibly. You think that's all you are to me? Isn't it? She gestured around the penthouse, at all his wealth and power. You're Moon Tae. I'm your cleaner. That's the beginning and end of our relationship. Moon Tae was quiet for a long moment, and she watched his gold chain rise and fall with his breathing. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made her knees weak. I notice everything in my space, Rumi. Everything. He took a step closer. 6 months ago, you started bringing magnolia flowers. Cheap bodega magnolias that you arrange in that blue vase in my kitchen when you think I'm not watching. You reorganize my books by color instead of alphabetically because you think it looks better, and you're right, it does. You open my bedroom blinds to exactly 45 degrees because somehow you figured out that I like natural light but hate glare. Her throat tightened. She'd thought herself invisible. She'd been so careful. You hum when you work, he continued, his voice getting softer, almost gentle. Old gospel songs. Your grandmother's favorites, I think, because sometimes you sing words about going home to Alabama, about red clay roads and magnolia trees. He tilted his head, and a perfect strand of black hair fell across his forehead, making him look younger, more vulnerable. You're not just my cleaner, Rumi. You're the only real thing in this penthouse. The only thing that isn't bought or controlled or artificial. Rumi couldn't breathe. The air had left the room, or maybe her lungs had forgotten how to work. Mr. Moon, the name. His hand reached toward her bandage, hovering just inches from her skin, waiting for permission she didn't know how to give. Give me the name of who did this to you. I can't. Can't or won't. Both. She grabbed her cleaning caddy with shaking hands, supplies rattling. I really need to go. I have 3 more houses today and... His hand caught her wrist. The unmarked one, careful to avoid the bruises. Gentle but firm, and she felt the cool metal of his rings against her skin. Expensive rings, probably. Designer pieces that cost more than she made in a month. If you leave now, you're walking away from my protection. His voice dropped even lower. Whoever hurt you will do it again. They always do. Men like that don't stop until someone makes them. Your protection? She almost laughed, the sound bitter and broken. You don't even know me. Not really. I know you have a daughter. His grip tightened fractionally. 7 years old, I think. I know you work 4 houses every single day to afford an apartment in a neighborhood where you're scared to walk at night. I know you ran from Alabama for reasons you never talk about. I know you're stronger than anyone I've ever met, and I know... He stopped, his jaw tightening, gold chain catching the light as his chest rose with tension. I know I won't let anyone hurt you again. The private elevator dinged, shattering the moment. Moon Tae's face changed instantly, the concern and vulnerability vanishing behind cold authorities. The crime boss sliding back into place like armor. A man stepped out, Korean, older, with watchful eyes that missed nothing. Uncle Seok. Sajangnim, we have a problem with the shipment from... The man stopped mid-sentence, taking in the scene before him. Moon Tae's hand on Rumi's wrist. How close they were standing. The intimacy of their postures. Moon Tae spoke rapid Korean, his tone dismissive and sharp. Uncle Seok's eyes narrowed, but he bowed with military precision and retreated to the elevator, though not before giving Rumi a look she couldn't decipher. Warning? Assessment? Disapproval? Rumi. Moon Tae's voice pulled her back, and when she looked up, the crime boss was gone again. Just a man, looking at her like she mattered, like she was real. Stay. Have dinner with me tonight. Tell me what happened. Let me help. I can't. Why not? Because you're Moon Tae. She gestured around the penthouse, at the art on the walls, the designer furniture, his expensive clothes and gold chain and all the power radiating off him like heat. And I'm nobody. I'm a cleaner from Alabama with a second-hand car and a daughter I can barely afford to feed. We don't exist in the same universe. His hand lifted to her face, and this time she didn't pull away. His thumb barely touched the edge of her bandage with such devastating gentleness it made tears spring to her eyes. You're wrong, he said softly. You're the first person I've wanted to know in 15 years, the first real thing I've wanted in my life since I built this empire. Rumi's phone buzzed in her pocket, shattering the spell. Flora's school. She pulled away, breaking contact, and felt the loss of his warmth immediately. I have to go. She was in the elevator before Moon Tae could respond, jabbing the button with trembling fingers. But she felt his eyes on her the entire descent, heavy and searching and impossibly dangerous. That night, lying in her narrow bed in their cramped apartment while Flora slept peacefully in the next room, Rumi touched the bandage on her face with gentle fingers. She wondered what it meant that Moon Tae, a man who controlled an empire, had looked at her, invisible, overlooked her, like she mattered, like she was visible, like she was real, like she was worth protecting, worth knowing, worth seeing. 3 days of radio silence followed. 3 days of Rumi expecting the call from white-glove domestics. We're terminating your contract with the Olympus. 3 days of her stomach twisting into knots every time her phone buzzed, convinced this was it. She'd lost her best-paying job because she'd let her guard down, because she'd let him see her. The call never came. Tuesday at 2 p.m., she stepped off the elevator expecting empty rooms and silent spaces. Instead, Moon Tae sat at his dining table, waiting. No expensive suit today. Just designer joggers that hung perfectly on his frame and a fitted black shirt that showed off his build. The gold chain still hung at his throat, catching light. 2 cups of Korean tea steamed between his hands, the fragrant vapor rising like offerings. "Sit with me." Not a command this time, almost a request. Tentative in a way that seemed foreign to him. Rumi's fingers tightened on her cleaning caddy until her knuckles went pale. "Mr. Moon, I should really start." "My people made some inquiries." His eyes stayed on hers, dark and intense. "Discreet ones. But I need to hear it from you. I need you to tell me." Her blood went cold, ice flooding her veins. Uncle Seok's network had been digging into her life, uncovering her secrets, exposing her shame. She sat because her legs suddenly felt weak. The chair felt too expensive beneath her, like she might somehow damage it just by existing. Moon-tae pushed a cup toward her, jasmine tea, the expensive kind that probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget, served in a cup so delicate she was afraid to touch it. "His name is Julian Moss." The words came out flat, dead, like she was reading from a police report. "Flora's father. My ex from Alabama." Moon-tae's expression didn't change, but something dark and dangerous flickered in his eyes like lightning behind storm clouds. He waited, giving her space to continue, and somehow that patience was worse than questioning. "He beat me for 2 years." Rumi's hands wrapped around the warm cup, seeking its heat. "Started a month after we moved in together. Little things at first. A grab that was too hard, a shove during an argument. Then it escalated." She swallowed hard. "He left when I was 6 months pregnant, said he didn't want a kid, didn't want the responsibility. I thought I was free." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "He came back 2 weeks ago." Her voice cracked. "Says I owe him $10,000 for his investment in Flora. Says if I don't pay up, he'll fight for custody. Take her just to hurt me, to punish me for leaving Alabama, for daring to try to build a better life." Moon-tae's face transformed before her eyes. The gentle man who'd noticed her magnolia flowers vanished completely. In his place sat the crime boss who controlled Beverly Hills' underworld. Cold, lethal, absolutely terrifying in his stillness. He pulled out his phone with movements that were almost lazy, deceptively casual. His fingers flew across the screen with practiced precision. Rapid Korean poured from his mouth, each word sharp as a blade being drawn from its sheath. She caught Uncle Seok's name twice. Julian's full name once. Moon-tae's tone left absolutely no room for questions, only immediate obedience. This was a man used to being obeyed without hesitation. He ended the call with a tap and set the phone down with such precise control it made Rumi's skin prickle. "That threat ends today." "What did you—" Rumi started, fear rising in her throat. "He won't bother you again." Moon-tae stood, circling the table with predatory grace. He crouched before her chair so they were eye level, and she could see gold flecks in his dark eyes. "I promise you that. Julian Moss will never touch you or threaten your daughter again." His hand lifted toward her face, slow, telegraphing his movements, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, when she sat frozen, his palm curved around her cheek with devastating gentleness, careful of the fading bruise beneath the bandage. His thumb brushed her skin, feather light, and her breath caught in her throat. "No one touches what's mine," he said softly, then seemed to catch himself, to hear his own possessiveness. "What I've chosen to protect. No one hurts you and walks away from it." He took her hand, the unmarked one, turned it palm down with reverent care, and pressed his lips to her knuckles. The kiss sent lightning racing up her arm, through her chest, pooling somewhere low and warm in her belly. She'd never been touched like this in her entire life, like she was precious, breakable, worth protecting, like she mattered. "Have dinner with me." His voice went rough, raw. "Tomorrow night. Blue Lotus. Bring Flora. Let me meet her properly, not as your employer, but as—" He paused. "As someone who wants to know both of you." Every instinct Rumi had honed over 28 years screamed warnings. Alabama girls who reached above their station got hurt. Men like Moon Tae didn't date women like her. They used them, discarded them, left them worse off than before. This was a fantasy, a dangerous game she couldn't win. But his thumb was still stroking her cheek with such tenderness. His eyes held hers with an intensity that made her feel seen for the first time in years, maybe in her whole life. "Yes," she whispered, sealing her fate with one small word. She just said yes, and honestly, if you're not subscribed by now, what are you even doing? This is the moment everything changes. Julian's about to find out what happens when you threaten a mafia boss's woman. Hit subscribe so you don't miss Moon Tae's revenge, or drop a comment confessing why you're still watching without subscribing. No judgment. Okay, maybe a little. Blue Lotus sat on a corner in Beverly Hills that whispered old money and older secrets, the kind of establishment where reservations had to be made months in advance and where a single meal cost more than Rumi made in a week. She stood outside with Flora's small, warm hand clutched in hers, both of them wearing their Sunday best, which still looked shabby and worn against the restaurant's elegant facade. The windows glowed with warm, golden light. Expensive cars lined the valet station, Bentleys and Teslas and Mercedes that probably cost more than Rumi would make in 5 years. Women in designer dresses glided past on the arms of men in $1,000 suits, and Rumi felt like an imposter about to be exposed. "Mama, are you sure we're allowed?" Flora tugged at her dress, a hand-me-down from the church donation bin that Rumi had carefully mended, letting out the hem with tiny, precise stitches so it would fit her growing girl. "We were invited, baby." Rumi squeezed her daughter's hand, fighting her own crushing doubts. Her only nice outfit was a navy dress she'd owned for 5 years, paired with shoes she'd resoled twice. The heel on the left one was slightly loose. Next to the Beverly Hills crowd, she felt like a fraud playing dress-up. The door opened before they could knock, as if someone had been watching for their arrival. A hostess in a traditional hanbok bowed with practiced grace. "Miss Cross, Sejongnim is waiting for you in the private dining room." They were led through the main dining room, all subtle mood lighting and wealthy patrons speaking in hushed tones, the clink of expensive silverware on fine china creating a symphony of privilege. Rumi felt every eye turn toward them, felt the weight of judgment, the curiosity. She held her head high and Flora's hand tighter. The private room in the back was a different world entirely. Moon Tae stood when they entered, and Rumi's breath caught painfully in her chest. He wore black slacks that fit perfectly, and a cream silk shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms roped with lean muscle and the edge of intricate tattoos she'd never seen before. Casual elegance that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The gold chain at his throat caught the candlelight, warm and inviting. But when he smiled at Flora, his whole face transformed. The crime boss disappeared, and in his place was just a man, looking at a little girl with genuine warmth. "You must be Flora." He crouched to her level, making himself physically small for her, unthreatening. "Your mom talks about you all the time. I feel like I already know you." Flora's eyes went wide as saucers. "She does?" "Constantly." His smile was genuine, no condescension, no fakeness. "She says you're the smartest girl in first grade, that you read better than kids twice your age." "I am in first grade," Flora corrected with 7-year-old solemnity. "But I read at a 3rd grade level. My teacher says I might skip a grade next year."
Then you and I will get along perfectly. I collect books, mostly Korean literature, but some English too.
Do you like books? Flora nodded enthusiastically, her earlier shyness evaporating. She launched into a detailed explanation of her current favorite, something about dragons and magic and a girl who could talk to animals. Moon-tae listened like she was the most important person in the room, asking thoughtful questions, laughing at her excitement, genuinely engaged. Rumi watched them, her heart doing something painful and beautiful in her chest. Julian had never looked at Flora like this, like she mattered, like her words and thoughts and dreams were worth hearing. Julian had looked at Flora like she was a burden, a mistake, something that had trapped him. Dinner arrived in waves, course after course of Korean dishes Rumi had never tried, each one explained patiently by Moon-tae. He taught Flora how to use chopsticks with infinite patience, laughing when she dropped food repeatedly, showing her the grip again and again, celebrating when she finally managed to grab a piece of bulgogi. "My grandmother in Seoul taught me," he said, gently adjusting Flora's small fingers. "She raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 8. She always said the strongest people are the ones who protect others before themselves, who put family first no matter the cost." "Like my mama," Flora said matter-of-factly, her voice filled with pride. "She protects me from everything. Even when she's scared, she protects me." Moon-tae's eyes found Rumi's across the table, and the look he gave her was so intense it made her skin flush warm. "Yes, exactly like your mama. She's the strongest person I know." Flora excused herself to the bathroom, skipping off with the hostess, and suddenly they were alone. The air in the room shifted immediately, tension crackling like electricity before a storm. "Thank you," Rumi said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "For being kind to her, for making her feel special." "I'm not being kind." Moon-tae leaned forward, his gold chain swinging slightly. "I'm being honest. She's incredible because you're incredible. You've raised an amazing kid despite everything working against you. Moon-tae, I meant what I said yesterday, about wanting to know you." His hand found hers across the table, fingers threading through hers like they'd been doing it for years, like they belonged there. "I know this is fast. I know our worlds don't make sense together on paper, but Rumi, I haven't felt this alive in years. You make me feel human again." She should pull away, should maintain professional distance, should protect her heart and Flora's heart from the inevitable pain. Instead, she turned her hand over, lacing their fingers together properly, letting herself feel the warmth of his skin, the calluses on his palm that told her he wasn't just a pretty face with money. His thumb began tracing circles on her palm, slow, hypnotic, sending sparks racing up her arm and settling in her chest like embers. "I see you running 4 houses a day, barely surviving, working yourself to exhaustion." His voice dropped, intimate and rough. "But you don't have to just survive anymore, Rumi. You could own your own company, set your own rates, hire other women like you, treat them with dignity, pay them fair wages, build something real, something that lasts." "That's just a dream," she whispered, afraid to hope, afraid to want. "Dreams like that don't come true for people like me. Dreams become real when someone believes in them hard enough." His eyes held a promise that made her want to cry. "I believe in yours. I believe in you." Flora burst back in, shattering the moment but grinning like she'd discovered the world's best secret. Moon-tae didn't let go of Rumi's hand, and when Flora noticed their linked fingers, she smiled even wider, looking between them with knowing eyes that seemed far too old for 7. They stayed 2 more hours, time slipping away like water. Moon-tae ordered dessert, pat bingsu that made Flora's eyes light up like Christmas morning, and told stories about soul, about his grandmother's cooking, about learning the restaurant business from the ground up. He asked about Rumi's childhood in Alabama, listened with genuine interest to her talk about her own grandmother's kitchen, about Sunday dinners and gospel music and magnolia trees in bloom. "Not just cleaning," he said thoughtfully when she mentioned her dream. "Something that pays fair wages, that treats people like they matter, like they're human beings deserving of respect and dignity." "It's just a dream," Rumi repeated, but this time the words held less conviction. "Not anymore." His eyes held hers across the table. "Not if you'll let me help make it real. I'll invest. You'll run it. Your vision, your rules, your business." The drive home was in Moon-tae's car, a sleek black Mercedes with leather seats that probably cost more than Rumi made in a year, so soft it felt like sitting on clouds. Uncle Sok drove, silent and watchful as always, his eyes finding them in the rearview mirror with that same unreadable expression. Disapproval? Concern? A warning she should heed? Flora fell asleep against Rumi's shoulder within minutes, full and happy and safe. Moon-tae shifted closer in the darkness, his hand finding Rumi's, fingers intertwining like they were meant to fit together. "She likes you," Rumi murmured, stroking Flora's braids. "Good." His thumb stroked over her knuckles with devastating tenderness. "Because I plan on being around a lot more. If you'll let me. If you'll give us a real chance. This is crazy." But she didn't pull her hand away. "Maybe." His free hand cupped her face, thumb brushing where the bandage had been. The bruise was fading now, yellow-green instead of that angry purple-black. Healing, like maybe she was healing too. "But I'm done pretending I don't want this. Want you. Want both of you in my life." The car stopped outside her apartment building, a rundown complex in a neighborhood that made Moon-tae's jaw visibly tighten, his eyes scanning the shadows, cataloging dangers. He helped her extract sleepy Flora from the back seat, his movements careful and gentle, then walked them to the door, despite Rumi's protests that it wasn't necessary. At her doorway, Flora secure on her hip and already drifting back to sleep, Rumi turned to say goodnight. Moon-tae kissed her, soft and searching, a question more than a demand, asking for permission even as he claimed it. Rumi's free hand fisted in his silk shirt, pulling him closer even as her mind screamed warnings about danger and different worlds and inevitable heartbreak. He tasted like possibility and danger mixed together, like everything she'd trained herself not to want, not to hope for. His expensive cologne mixed with her drugstore perfume in the night air, his gold chain pressed cool against her throat. His hand cradled the back of her head like she was precious, like she was treasured, like she was worth everything. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers in the darkness. "Tomorrow," he whispered, his breath warm against her lips. "Come to the penthouse, not to work, to see me, to spend time with me. Just us." "Moon-tae." "Please." The word was raw, honest, stripped of all pretense. "Just let me try to deserve you. Let me try to be worthy of what you're offering." "Okay," she breathed, crossing a line she could never uncross. "Tomorrow." She watched him disappear into the night, Uncle Sok's unreadable eyes following her through the car window like a warning she was too intoxicated to heed. When she finally closed and locked the door, Flora stirred against her shoulder. "I like Mr. Moon, Mama," she mumbled sleepily. "Me too, baby." Rumi touched her lips where he'd kissed her, still feeling the ghost of his mouth on hers. "Me too." She'd just agreed to walk fully into his world, to stop being invisible, to reach for something that should have been impossible for a woman like her. God help her, she couldn't wait. If you've made it this far without subscribing, tell me why. And hey, comment below. Team Moon Tae or Team Runaway? Let's see where you stand. The call came at 7:30 a.m., just as Rumi was braiding Flora's hair for school, her fingers moving through the familiar pattern with practiced ease.
Ms. Cross? This is Inspector Jolie Kim, LAPD. The woman's voice was professional, cold, efficient, the voice of authority. We need to talk about Julian Moss. Rumi's blood turned to ice in her veins, her fingers freezing mid-braid. What about him? He's filed harassment complaints against you. Claims you made false accusations of domestic abuse to damage his reputation, and that Korean gang members have been threatening his life. A pause, heavy with implication. He's provided dates, times, descriptions of vehicles. Very detailed information, Ms. Cross. Are you involved with organized crime? The floor tilted beneath her feet. No. I would never. We also have a note here that Alabama Child Services flagged you when you left the state with your daughter 2 years ago. They'll want to know about these new allegations, especially the gang involvement. Another pause. Child endangerment is a serious concern, Ms. Cross. Flora. They could take Flora. The words echoed in her head like a death sentence. After everything she'd done, everywhere she'd run, all the sacrifices she'd made, they could still take her baby. Rumi dropped Flora off at school with hands that shook so badly she could barely grip the steering wheel. Then she went straight to the Olympus, not calling first, not thinking, just driven by pure panic and fury and terror all mixed into one overwhelming emotion. She didn't even remember the elevator ride up. Moon Tae answered the door in workout clothes, gray joggers slung dangerously low on his hips, a black tank top that showed off muscled arms slick with sweat, his hair slightly mussed. The gold chain swung as he moved toward her. He smiled when he saw her, that soft smile he seemed to reserve just for her. Then he read her face, and the smile died. What happened? The police called. Her voice came out harsh, accusing, sharp as broken glass. Julian filed complaints, says Korean gangsters are threatening him, says I lied about the abuse, that I'm some kind of criminal. Moon Tae's expression went carefully neutral, his face becoming a mask. Rumi, what did you do? She pushed past him into the penthouse, her fear manifesting as anger because anger was safer than the terror threatening to drown her. Your conversation with Julian, what exactly did that involve? What did you say to him? What did your people do? I warned him to stay away from you and Flora. His voice was calm, too calm. That's all. How? Her voice rose, cracking. With what words? What threats? Did you send men to his house? Did you threaten to kill him? She was shaking now, her whole body trembling. Because now Inspector Kim is asking if I'm involved with organized crime, and Alabama Child Services wants to investigate me, and I could lose Flora. Do you understand? They could take my daughter. That won't happen. His voice dropped to that deadly calm that meant he was already calculating, planning, fixing. I'll make sure. You don't get to make sure. The words exploded out of her like a dam breaking. You don't get to fix my problems with whatever criminal connections you have. I could lose my daughter because of you. Because you couldn't just leave it alone, couldn't just let me handle it my own way. His jaw clenched, a muscle ticking. I was protecting you, protecting Flora. I didn't ask for your protection. I didn't. She stopped, realizing the devastating truth. I never asked for anything. You just assumed. You just took over like I'm some damsel who needs saving by the crime boss? He stepped closer, gold chain catching light, anger finally breaking through his controlled facade. Say it, Rumi. You're mad because of what I am, because I used the resources I have to protect the woman I... He stopped himself. I'm mad because you're making it worse. Tears burned her eyes, threatening to spill over. I'm mad because Her voice cracked, breaking on the words. I want to not be terrified that loving you will destroy everything I've built for my daughter. Everything I've sacrificed for. Everything I've run from and fought for. The room went silent. Completely, utterly silent. Moontae stared at her, and she watched the anger drain from his face like water, replaced by something raw and vulnerable and almost painful to witness. You love me, he whispered, his voice breaking on those 3 words. It doesn't matter. Tears spilled over, hot on her cheeks. Don't you see? It doesn't matter what I feel if it costs me Flora. She's everything. It's the only thing that matters. He moved toward her, but she stepped back. She just confessed she loves him in the middle of their biggest fight. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me if you once loved someone like this. Rumi turned toward the elevator, needing to escape, to think, to breathe. She froze. Uncle Seok stood in the doorway like a silent sentinel, having entered unheard on feet that made no sound. His watchful eyes moved between them. Moontae, stripped bare and vulnerable in a way the older man had probably never seen. Rumi crying and desperate, and his expression was completely, utterly unreadable. Everything was falling apart, crumbling like sand castles before the tide. Moontae pulled out his phone before Rumi could speak, before she could run, before the moment could shatter completely. His fingers flew across the screen with focused intensity, his jaw set in that way that meant decisions were being made. Power was being wielded. 3 calls. That's all it took to reshape reality. The first was to a lawyer whose name Rumi recognized from billboards all over Los Angeles, the kind who defended celebrities and politicians, who made impossible problems disappear. The second call, conducted entirely in rapid Korean, made Inspector Kim's reassignment happen before lunch, transferred to some investigation in the valley. The third made Julian's complaint vanish from the system like it had never existed, erased as completely as if it had been written in sand. Uncle Seok executed each order with military precision, making calls of his own, coordinating protection details, moving pieces on a chessboard only he and Moontae could see. But his eyes kept finding Rumi, and the message in them was crystal clear. You don't understand what world you're entering. You don't know what you're asking of him. Rumi watched Moontae reshape reality, with nothing but words and power and money. Watched him move through his penthouse like the crime boss he truly was, gold chain swinging with each movement, power radiating from him like heat from asphalt on a summer day. And she felt both grateful and terrified in equal measure. Grateful because Flora was safe, terrified because of what it cost, what it meant, what she was becoming by accepting this protection. There. He set down his phone with finality. Flora's school has private security now. Discreet, professional. The complaint's gone, erased from every database. Inspector Kim won't bother you again. You're safe. This is what I'm afraid of. Her voice came out small, almost a whisper. She gestured around the penthouse with a trembling hand, at the expensive art, the designer furniture, at him standing there in his workout clothes and gold chain with all that terrible, beautiful power. Everything you are, the penthouse, the gold chain, the phone calls that make police investigations disappear with a snap of your fingers. It includes things I can't be part of, things that could destroy Flora, corrupt her, put her in danger. Then I'll change. The words came fast, almost desperate, and she heard the fear in them, fear of losing her. Uncle Seok can run everything. I'll walk away from it all, go completely legitimate. Just restaurants, just business. No more shadows, no more. Uncle Seok's expression darkened like storm clouds, but he said nothing. His loyalty to Moon Tae was absolute, but she could see the concern, the worry about what his boss was offering to sacrifice. Rumi's heart broke because she could see Moon Tae meant every word, would actually give up his empire, his power, everything he'd built over 15 years, for a cleaner from Alabama with a daughter and more problems than solutions. "I need time," she whispered, the words tasting like ash. "To think, to figure out if I can do this, if I can be what you need while keeping Flora safe." Pain flashed across his face, raw and unguarded. "How much time?" "I don't know." She was already moving toward the elevator. "I don't know anything anymore." She left him standing in his perfect penthouse, surrounded by all his wealth and power, looking more lost and broken than she'd ever seen him. More human than the crime boss, more vulnerable than the man in the expensive clothes and gold chain. Just a man, watching the woman he loved walk away. 4 days of silence followed. 4 long days that felt like 4 years. Rumi went through the motions like a ghost haunting her own life. Cleaned other houses with mechanical precision, took care of Flora with autopilot efficiency, collapsed into bed each night too exhausted to cry. Moon Tae didn't call, didn't text, gave her exactly what she'd asked for. The silence was somehow worse than any argument could have been. At the Olympus, Uncle Seok watched his boss slowly fall apart. Moon Tae checked his phone every 5 minutes like a man possessed, the blue light illuminating his face in the dark penthouse. He barely ate, pushing food around his plate before abandoning it. He stood by the kitchen counter for hours, just staring at the magnolia flowers Rumi had left behind, now wilting in their cheap vase, petals browning at the edges. "Forget the woman," Uncle Seok said finally on the 4th day, unable to watch anymore. "Sajangnim, she's not worth this. She's just a cleaner. There are other women better suited to your world." Moon Tae's laugh was hollow, empty, like wind through abandoned buildings. "Then nothing is worth it. Nothing matters." Uncle Seok saw it then with crystalline clarity. His untouchable boss, the man who'd built an empire through sheer will and ruthlessness, was completely and irreversibly gone for a cleaner from Alabama. And no amount of reason, no logical argument, no practical consideration would bring him back. Love didn't follow logic. It never had. Rumi moved through her days like a ghost, going through motions that felt increasingly meaningless. Work at other houses that felt empty now, missing something she couldn't name. Taking care of Flora with the same devotion but less joy, collapsing into bed and staring at the ceiling for hours, missing him. Flora noticed first. Kids always did. They saw what adults tried to hide. "Mama, why don't you sing anymore?" Her daughter watched her from the kitchen table one evening, homework spread out but forgotten. "You used to hum Grandma's songs while you cooked. I miss it." "I'm just tired, baby." The lie fell flat. "You jump when the phone rings now." Flora's voice got small, scared. "Like you did back in Alabama, before we left. When Daddy was—" She stopped, but they both knew what she wasn't saying. Rumi's hand stilled on the pot she was stirring, frozen mid-motion. "Why don't we see Mr. Moon anymore? I liked him. He was nice to me. He listened when I talked about books, like what I said actually mattered." "It's complicated, Flora." "He made you smile, Mama." Flora's 7-year-old wisdom cut straight through every excuse, every rationalization. "You don't smile a lot anymore. Not since we left Alabama, and definitely not since Daddy came back and started bothering us. But you smiled with Mr. Moon." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper, like she was afraid of the answer. "I really liked when you smiled." That night, after Flora finally fell asleep,
Rumi lay in her narrow bed staring at the water-stained ceiling, replaying every moment like a movie on loop. Moon-Tae's gentleness with Flora, the way he'd crouched to her level and listened like her words mattered. His fierce protection, the cold fury in his eyes when he'd learned about Julian, the way he'd touched her bandage like she was precious and breakable and worth protecting, how he wore his wealth and power like armor, but had offered to strip it all away. For her, for them. Her phone glowed at 2 a.m., lighting up the dark room like a beacon. I miss you. Tell me how to fix this. I'll do anything. Rumi stared at the message, thumb hovering over the keyboard, heart racing. She thought about Flora's words, about how she'd stopped singing her grandmother's songs, about how loving Moon-Tae felt terrifying and impossible, and like the only real thing she'd felt in years. She thought about his gold chain catching light, his hands gentle on her face, the way he'd looked at her daughter like she mattered, like she was worth his time and attention. The way he'd looked at her like she was visible, real, worth protecting, worth loving. Her phone buzzed again, making her jump. Please. Just one word. Raw and honest, and breaking her heart into 1,000 pieces. Rumi closed her eyes, touched the place on her cheek where his thumb had brushed her skin with such devastating gentleness, and made her decision. The pounding on her door came at 2:17 a.m., loud enough to wake the entire building. Rumi jerked awake from restless half-sleep, heart racing, hand reaching instinctively for her phone to call 911. In neighborhoods like hers, late-night knocking never meant anything good. Then she heard his voice, rough and desperate. Rumi, please. I know you're awake. I saw your light on. Please. Moon-Tae. She stumbled to the door, checked the peephole just to be safe, and barely recognized the man on the other side. Designer clothes rumpled like he'd slept in them for days, like he'd been wearing the same outfit since she left. Gold chain hanging crooked, askew. Hair disheveled, falling across his forehead in disarray. No bodyguards flanking him. No Uncle Sok standing watchful guard. No driver waiting in an expensive car below. Just him, looking completely and utterly undone. She opened the door and he pushed inside before she could speak, before she could think, desperation making him less controlled than she'd ever seen him. 4 days, he said, and his voice cracked on the words. 4 days of pretending I can function without you. I can't. I tried, Rumi. God, I tried. But I can't do this. He paced her tiny living room, the entire space smaller than his bathroom. She realized with painful clarity, like a caged animal, a predator trapped in too small a space. His hands ran through his hair repeatedly, destroying what was left of its usual perfection, making him look wild. You've become my weakness, and in my world, weakness gets you killed. He stopped pacing, faced her, and his eyes were raw. But I don't care anymore. I'd rather die vulnerable with you than live safe and alone in that empty penthouse. I'd rather have one real day with you than a lifetime of that hollow existence. Moon-Tae, I know what people will say. His voice turned fierce, almost angry, but the anger was directed at the world, not at her. Korean crime boss and his black cleaner, like I bought you. Like this is some kind of power trip, some fetish, like you're a trophy or a fantasy I'm living out. He crossed to her, and she could smell his cologne mixed with sweat and desperation. But anyone who has a problem with you has a problem with me. And I've already started transferring operations to Uncle Seok. Blue Lotus is going fully legitimate. No more shadow businesses, no more gray areas. I'm choosing you, Rumi. I'm choosing us. I'm choosing this life over that one. Tears blurred her vision, hot and insistent. You don't have to give up everything for me. That's not what I want. I want to.
He cupped her face in both hands, thumbs brushing away her tears with devastating gentleness. I want you. I want Flora. I want Sunday dinners and magnolia flowers and arguments about how I organize my books. I want to teach Flora to speak Korean and have her teach me about dragons and magic. I want messy and complicated and terrifying. I want real, even if it scares me, especially because it scares me. I love you. The words tumbled out through her tears, and she grabbed his expensive silk shirt with both hands, pulling him closer, needing him closer. All of you. Even the complicated parts, even the scary parts, even the part that wears too much gold and thinks he can fix everything with a phone call. His laugh was half sob, broken and beautiful. Too much gold? Way too much gold. She was crying and laughing at the same time, everything spilling out. He kissed her then, deep and claiming and desperate, like he was drowning and she was air, like she was salvation and damnation wrapped into one. His hands cradled her face like she was precious, like she was everything, like losing her would destroy him more completely than any rival ever could. The gold chain pressed cool against her throat, his expensive cologne mixed with her cheap soap, and she didn't care. None of the differences mattered. Not money or power or backgrounds or the color of their skin or the worlds they came from. None of it mattered except this feeling, this connection, this love. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers in the darkness of her cramped apartment. Marry me. His voice came out rough, raw, stripped of all pretense. Not now. Not tomorrow. I know it's too soon. I know you need time. But eventually, let me spend my life proving you're the best decision I ever made. His hands tightened on her face, and she felt them trembling. Let me be Flora's father. Let me protect you both. Not because you're weak, but because you're everything. Because loving you makes me stronger, not weaker. Yes. She whispered without hesitation, without doubt. Yes to all of it. He kissed her again, softer this time, like sealing a promise, like making a vow, like writing their names together in permanent ink. In her cramped apartment that smelled like leftover dinner and hope, in a neighborhood where expensive cars didn't dare venture after dark, the crime boss and the cleaner chose each other. Chose messy and complicated and real over easy and safe and empty. Chose love, with all its terrifying possibility. A small voice cut through the moment like a knife through silk, soft and utterly confused. Mama, why is Mr. Moon here? Flora stood in her doorway in her favorite pajamas, the ones with little golden stars scattered across purple fabric that she'd picked out herself at Target, sleepy eyes blinking slowly in the dim light filtering from the hallway. Her braids were slightly mussed from sleep, one side flattened against her head in that adorable way that always made Rumi's heart squeeze. She clutched her worn, stuffed rabbit, the one she'd had since she was 2, looking impossibly small and vulnerable. Moon-tae immediately crouched to her level, his gold chain swinging forward and catching what little light there was in the cramped apartment. He made himself physically small, unthreatening, folding his tall frame down so they were eye to eye. He showed her the same respect, the same careful attention he'd show any adult, any business partner, anyone who truly mattered in his world. Flora. His voice was gentle, serious, stripped of any condescension. I came to talk to your mom about something really important, and now I need to talk to you too, if that's okay. Can I do that? Can we talk? Flora patted closer on bare feet, the hardwood floor cool beneath her toes, studying him with those eyes that seemed far too old for 7. Eyes that had seen too much, understood too much about loss and fear and people who made promises they didn't keep. About what? about becoming part of your family." He glanced at Rumi, who stood frozen by the couch, tears streaming down her face, and she nodded through her crying, unable to speak. "Your mama and I, we care about each other very much. We love each other, and I care about you too, Flora, so much." "But you're the most important person in your mama's life, which means you're the most important person to me too. Nothing happens unless you say it's okay. So I need to ask your permission." Flora's small face grew serious, solemn in a way that made her look like a tiny judge weighing evidence. She clutched her rabbit tighter. Then she asked the question that shattered both their hearts into a million pieces. "Will you stay?" Her voice came out small, scared, trembling like a leaf in a storm. "My real daddy left when I was a baby. Mama says he didn't want me. People always leave us. Everyone always leaves. Even when they promise they won't, they leave anyway." The words hung in the air like ghosts of every broken promise, every abandonment, every person who'd looked at them and decided they weren't worth staying for. Moontae reached out slowly, telegraphing his movements, and took her small hands in his larger ones with infinite gentleness. His hands, which had ordered violence, which had built an empire through ruthlessness, held her tiny fingers like they were made of spun glass. "I'm not leaving, not ever." His voice was fierce, absolute, the same tone he used when making unbreakable deals. "You're my family now, Flora. You and your mama. And I protect my family. Always. No matter what. That's a promise, and I don't break my promises. Ever." Flora studied him with 7-year-old seriousness, her dark eyes searching his face for lies, for cracks in the armor, for the inevitable betrayal she'd learned to expect from men who weren't there. She was looking for the moment when he'd reveal himself as just another Julian, all pretty words and empty promises. Whatever she saw in Moontae's face must have satisfied some deep need in her soul, answered some question she'd been carrying for 7 years. Because suddenly, without warning, she threw her arms around his neck with complete, absolute trust. The kind of trust that could break you if you weren't careful with it. "Okay," she whispered against his shoulder, her voice muffled. "You can be my family." Moontae stood smoothly, lifting her easily like she weighed nothing at all, and she wrapped her legs around his waist, still clinging to him. He reached for Rumi with his free arm, and she stepped into his embrace without hesitation. Suddenly they were complete, crime boss with his gold chain and designer clothes rumpled from desperation, cleaner in her old faded pajamas with the hole in the sleeve she kept meaning to mend, and little girl in star pajamas forming something entirely new. Something that shouldn't exist but did anyway. A family. Their family. Built on love instead of blood, on choice instead of obligation. Moontae's phone buzzed insistently in his pocket, vibrating against Rumi's hip where she pressed close to him. Uncle Seok, undoubtedly worried about his boss disappearing in the middle of the night without security, without backup, without telling anyone where he was going. Moontae answered one-handed, Flora still clinging to him like a baby koala, her face buried in his neck. She was already falling back asleep, the emotional exhaustion catching up with her small body. "Hyung," he said softly in Korean, then switched to English so Rumi could understand, so she could be part of this moment, too. "I found my family. I'm home." He hung up before Uncle Seok could respond, before the older man could offer warnings or concerns or practical considerations. None of that mattered anymore. In that cramped apartment that smelled like leftover dinner and cheap air freshener and hope, in a building where the heat didn't always work and the neighbors were too loud, something beautiful and impossible began. The integration of two worlds that should never have touched, that society said didn't belong together. Korean and Southern Black, Beverly Hills and Alabama, power and humility,
gold chains and magnolia flowers, expensive cologne and drugstore soap, designer silk and secondhand cotton, love, complicated and messy and imperfect and absolutely perfectly real. Moon Tae carried Flora to her bedroom, Rumi following close behind, and together they tucked her back into her narrow bed with its worn comforter. Flora's eyes were already closing, but she reached out and grabbed both their hands. "Night, Mama. Night, Daddy." The word came out sleep-slurred, natural, like she'd been saying it all her life. Rumi saw Moon Tae's face crack open, raw emotion flooding through. This powerful man, this crime boss, undone by a 7-year-old calling him Daddy for the first time. They stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching Flora sleep, hands intertwined between them. "She called me Daddy," Moon Tae whispered, his voice breaking. "She did," Rumi confirmed, squeezing his hand. "I'm her father now." "Yes, you are." He turned to her in the darkness of that cramped apartment, this man who'd crossed every line, broken every rule of his world to get here. "I won't let her down. I won't let either of you down. I swear it." "I know," Rumi said simply, because she did. She'd seen him with Flora, seen the fierce protectiveness, the genuine care. "I know." They went back to the living room, and Moon Tae pulled her down onto the couch beside him, tucking her against his chest. His gold chain was cool against her cheek. His heartbeat was steady beneath her ear. "Uncle Seok is going to have opinions," Rumi said quietly. "Uncle Seok will get over it." Moon Tae's hand stroked through her hair. "He already is. He told me last week that you're good for me. That I'm more human now than I've been in 15 years. "Really?" "Really." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "He said my grandmother would have loved you, that she would have said you have steel in your spine and fire in your heart." Rumi felt tears prick her eyes again. "I wish I could have met her. She would have adopted you immediately, would have taught you all her recipes and told you embarrassing stories about me as a kid." His voice was warm with memory and loss. "She would have loved Flora, would have spoiled her absolutely rotten." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just breathing together, existing in the same space. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet for once. No sirens, no shouting, just the distant hum of traffic on the freeway. "So what happens now?" Rumi asked finally. "Now?" Moon Tae shifted so he could look at her face. "Now I'm going to spend every day earning the trust Flora just gave me. I'm going to make Uncle Seok's life miserable as he takes over operations. I'm going to marry you. When you're ready, no rush. I'm going to be the father Flora deserves, and I'm going to love you both for the rest of my life." "That's a pretty good plan." "I thought so." His smile was soft, vulnerable, nothing like the crime boss. Just a man who'd found his way home. "What about you? What do you want?" Rumi thought about it, really thought. "I want to build my business. I want Flora to see that her mama can be more than invisible, more than just surviving. I want Sunday dinners with your people and my people all mixed together. I want to teach you how to make my grandmother's cornbread. I want—" She stopped, overwhelmed. "You want everything," Moon Tae finished for her. "And you should have it. You deserve all of it, and more. We're really doing this? We're really going to make this work?" "We already are making it work." He kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. "We already are." Some years later, Rumi stood in their shared penthouse at the Olympus. Their penthouse now, not his, theirs, arranging fresh magnolia flowers in that same cheap blue vase from the bodega. It looked absurdly out of place among all the expensive crystal and designer decor, but she'd refused to get rid of it. Her ritual, her connection to Alabama, to the woman she'd been and the woman she'd become. Some things were worth keeping, worth protecting.
Some things reminded you of how far you'd come. "You're doing it again." Moon-tae's voice came from the kitchen doorway, warm with affection and something deeper. Contentment, maybe. The kind of peace he'd never thought he'd find. He wore casual clothes on this Sunday morning, soft gray sweats and a white t-shirt, and that ever-present gold chain that had become part of who he was. Coffee steamed in his hand, the expensive blend he'd finally gotten her to appreciate. Staring at those flowers like they hold the secrets of the universe. "They kind of do," Rumi said, turning to smile at him. She wore his shirt, an old Stanford one that Flora had given him as a joke, now soft from washing, and nothing else underneath, her bare legs catching the morning sunlight. Her natural hair, which she'd finally stopped straightening, was in a new style she was still getting used to, locks that she was growing out, embracing her texture the way she'd never been brave enough to do before. "These flowers connect me to everything I was. I don't ever want to forget." "You couldn't if you tried." He crossed to her, set down his coffee, and pulled her close. "It's in every strong decision you make, every time you stand up for your workers, every time you teach Flora about where she comes from." The penthouse that had once intimidated her now felt like home. They'd changed it together, making it theirs. Her grandmother's quilts were draped over the designer furniture. Flora's artwork covered one wall in the hallway. Korean art hung beside photographs of Rumi's family in Alabama. It was a beautiful, messy collision of worlds. Her phone rang. Flora's picture lighting up the screen. Her baby, not so much a baby anymore at 17, on the verge of everything. "Mama!" Her daughter's voice burst with pure, unfiltered excitement, the kind that made Rumi's heart soar. "I got in, Stanford, full scholarship, full ride, Mama, everything covered." Rumi's voice trembled with pride so intense it almost hurt. "Baby, I'm so proud of you, so incredibly proud." Moon-tae crossed to her immediately, reading her face, and pulled her close with one strong arm. He pressed a kiss to her temple, that gesture of affection that had become as natural as breathing over 3 years. "Like mother, like daughter," he murmured, loud enough for Flora to hear through the phone. "Brilliant and unstoppable, both of you." "Tell Dad I said he's a sap." Flora's voice came through, laughing. "Dad." It never got old, hearing Flora call him that, never stopped making Moon-tae's eyes get suspiciously bright. After they hung up, Rumi leaned into Moon-tae's embrace, overwhelmed with gratitude for this life she'd somehow stumbled into. Cross and Konin had flourished beyond her wildest, most impossible dreams, built on the principles she'd always believed in. Fair wages that people could actually live on, real benefits including health care and paid time off, and treating workers with the dignity every human being deserved. They were expanding across California now, with talks of going national. Moon-tae's initial investment had made it possible, but it was her vision, her leadership, her iron will, and her grandmother's lessons that made it successful. She still wore her original white-glove domestics uniform sometimes when she visited job sites, to remind herself where she'd started, to remind her employees that she understood their struggles because she'd lived them. Moon-tae had gone fully legitimate, just like he'd promised that desperate night in her cramped apartment. Blue Lotus now had 5 locations across Southern California, with plans for more. Uncle Sok ran daily operations and had become Uncle Sok to Flora, too, bringing Korean sweets every week, teaching her Korean with surprising patience, showing up at her school events with gruff affection and fierce pride. He'd eventually admitted to Rumi, after a few shots of soju at a family dinner, that she was the best thing that ever happened to his stubborn boss. That Moon-tae had been dying slowly in his gilded cage before she'd made him remember how to be human. That evening, their penthouse filled with family in the beautiful, chaotic way that had become their tradition. Uncle Seok and his wife arrived first, arms loaded with banchan and homemade kimchi.
Rumi's grandmother came next, visiting from Alabama for the month, bringing Tupperware containers of soul food, collard greens and mac and cheese, and her famous peach cobbler that Moontae had become addicted to. Flora burst in with 3 of her friends from school, all of them talking and laughing, comfortable in this space that bridged 2 worlds. Some of Moontae's associates from the restaurant business came too, all legitimate now, all family in the way that mattered. The dining table groaned under the weight of 2 cultures colliding in the most beautiful way. Korean and Southern Black, Seoul and Montgomery, power and humility. Kimchi sat beside collard greens, bulgogi next to fried chicken, banchan sharing space with mac and cheese, gold chains and magnolia flowers, expensive cologne and familiar spices, designer clothes and Sunday best, languages mixed, Korean and English and Southern drawl all blending together in a symphony of belonging. Uncle Seok's wife taught Rumi's grandmother how to make proper kimchi, while grandmother taught her the secret to perfect cornbread. The secret was love and bacon grease and never rushing. Flora and her friends argued about college choices and career plans, dreams that seemed impossible but weren't, not anymore. Moontae and Uncle Seok discussed business, speaking that mixed language they'd developed, Korean peppered with English, English softened with Korean. Rumi moved through the crowd, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. This was her family now, blood and chosen, Korean and black, wealthy and working class, all of it mixed together in beautiful, messy reality. After everyone finally left, after the dishes were washed and the leftovers packed away, after Flora had gone to bed excited about her future, Moontae found Rumi on the balcony overlooking Beverly Hills' glittering lights. The city spread out below them like a carpet of diamonds and promises. "Regrets?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. His gold chain was cool against her neck, familiar as her own heartbeat now. The question was ritual. He asked it sometimes, needing reassurance that this was real, that she was happy. Never. She leaned into him, into his warmth and strength and love. Not a single one. You? Only one. His arms tightened around her. That I didn't notice that bandage on your face sooner. That I wasted 6 months seeing you without really seeing you. 6 months of you being invisible when you should have been everything from the very first day. Rumi turned in his arms, the city lights creating a halo around them both. She reached up and touched the gold chain that had become as familiar as his heartbeat, as much a part of him as his eyes or his smile or the way he said her name. "You see me now." "Every day," he agreed, bending down to kiss her softly, tenderly, with all the love he'd learned to feel because of her. "For the rest of my life. For every day we have left on this earth, my beautiful, strong, impossible wife. Your stubborn, flower-arranging, book-reorganizing wife who used to clean your floors," she corrected with a smile, that old joke between them that never got old. The reminder of where they'd started, how far they'd come. "Mine," he agreed, pulling her closer as the city sparkled below them like fallen stars. "Completely, perfectly mine. And I'm yours, always yours." And Rumi Cross, once invisible in her burgundy uniform, once just the cleaner, once the woman everyone overlooked, had never felt more seen, more valued, more loved, more completely and perfectly home. She thought about that morning 3 years ago, standing in her cramped apartment with foundation 3 shades too light covering Julian's bruises. She thought about the terror of that elevator ride up to the Olympus, certain she was about to lose her best-paying job. She thought about Moontae's hand hovering near her face, asking permission. The way he'd said her name like it was precious, The way he'd noticed her flowers and her humming and the angle of the blinds. The way he'd seen her when she'd spent 28 years perfecting invisibility. She thought about Flora calling him daddy for the first time, about Uncle Seok grudgingly admitting she was good for his boss, about building something real and lasting with her business, about Korean and soul food sharing the same table, about being seen and valued and loved exactly as she was. "Thank you," she whispered against Moon-tae's chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong. "For what?" "For seeing me. For making me believe I was worth seeing. Rumi." He tilted her face up to his, and his eyes were suspiciously bright in the city lights. "You were always worth seeing. Always worth everything. I was just the first one smart enough to look." She kissed him then, there on the balcony with Beverly Hills spread below them like a kingdom they'd conquered together. A kingdom built not on fear or power or money, but on love and choice and seeing each other clearly. And somewhere in that penthouse, in a bedroom that was hers by right, not by job, Flora slept peacefully, dreaming of Stanford and futures that were no longer impossible. 3 people who'd found each other against all odds. A cleaner, a crime boss, and a little girl. A family, chosen and built and fiercely protected. Home. If this story moved you, if you felt every moment of Rumi and Moon-tae's journey from invisible to seen, from broken to whole, subscribe, so you never miss another love story that proves fairy tales can happen in real life. And drop a comment telling me, what was the moment that made you believe in them? Was it the magnolia flowers? The way he crouched for Flora? The 2 a.m. please? I want to hear which moment captured your heart. Plus, where are you watching from? Let's build our own family in these comments. Thank you for taking this journey with Rumi, Moon-tae, and Flora. Thank you for believing that love can cross any divide, heal any wound, and make the invisible finally beautifully seen.